Hi everybody, it's Miss Lorenz here. I'm going to go through 1.3. This is just a little mini lesson. I'm going to go through the pages 21 through 23 with you, just kind of explaining it as I go, and then you'll be ready to get started on the assignment that's posted on Canvas. All right, so in this first one, we're looking at rain increasing the height of the water in this kiddie pool here. And we know that evaporation decreases the height. And so we're looking at change in the amount of water. And so the pool water level is currently 2 inches above the fill line. So that's why we have this line right here at 2 inches. And so what we're doing is we're writing in the final height of the water or the change in the water. And so we just have to really use some reasoning skills to be able to figure out what's happening here. So if the starting height of the water is 2 and the change is 0, in other words, it doesn't change at all, then we know the final height of the water is 2. Make sure, students, that you're going through this with me as I go through it. In the second one, if we start at 2, but we end at 1, and so we're starting here at 2, but we end at 1, notice we had to drop to get to that 1, and so we dropped 1 inch to end up at 1. So we're indicating that with a -1. If the starting height of the water was 2, and then it dropped 2, we end up at 0. If the starting height of the water was 2, and it dropped 3, see how I'm reading that -3 as dropped 3? Then we end up at -1. If the starting height of the water is 2, and it changes by a -4, all right? So I'm also going to say that drops 4. This is still a change of a -4, or it drops 4. We end up at -2. So what we're looking at here is we're just looking at how our change can result in a number that is greater than 0, and it can also result in a number that is less than 0. So I'm going to skip down to B here. Will the sum of 2 and -6 be a positive or a negative number? So sum, that indicates that we're adding. So the sum of 2 and -6. So we're adding 2 and -6. And sometimes you're going to see the -6 or a negative number in parentheses just to separate the negative sign from this plus. It doesn't change the value. That's still 2 plus -6. So I'm at +2. If I'm adding a -6, I'm dropping 6. And if we look back at our number line here, if we're at +2 and we drop 6, we're going to end here at -4. Okay, and now we're going to look at adding two negative integers. And so I want you to think of that as what happens when you start with negative and then you're adding more negatives. So I'm going to jump ahead to this example right here, -4 plus -6. So if we're already at -4 on the number line, then we're adding -6, or we're dropping 6 more, then we continue down that negative side of the number line all the way to 10. Or -10. So it's almost like you're adding 4 and 6, but you're adding them on the negative side of the number line. I really like how we're looking here at the absolute value. So the absolute value of -4 is 4. The absolute value of -6 is 6. So just like I said, it's like you're adding on the negative side of the number line. What you're doing is you're finding the absolute value of both of those numbers and adding them. So let's take a look at one of these problems. Dana recorded a temperature of 2 degrees and a second temperature drop of 3 degrees. So she recorded a temperature drop of 2 degrees. So that's -2. And that's our plus. She recorded a second temperature drop of -3. So it dropped 2 degrees and then it dropped 3 degrees more. So we're already at -2, then we're going to add 3 more negatives, so we're going to end up at -5. The total change in temperature is 5 degrees. The sum is -5. If we add -2 plus -3, we end up with -5. The change, though, the total change in temperature was 5 degrees. All right. All right, let's take a look at adding integers with different signs. So this is where it can get a little bit confusing when one of the numbers you're adding is a positive and one of the numbers you're adding is a negative. So if we look at the example of -5 plus 4, that's what I want to talk about. I want you to think about it as where it lives on the number line. So if -5 is over here, but we're not adding negatives, so we're not going to continue down the negative side. We're going to add positives, so we become more positive by 4. So we're at -5. Now we've moved towards the positive direction by 4. We don't have enough to end up at 0, so we end up right here at -1. Let's try another one. 2 plus -2. So think about where 2 lives on the number line, right here. And then if we're adding -2, we're dropping 2, and we end up exactly back at 0. We would call this example, 2 plus -2, adding the opposites or adding the additive inverses. That's what it says right here. But I like to think of it as remembering that +2 and -2 are opposites. And when you add them, of course, you end up with 0. And if you remember when we worked with those tiles, those positive and negative tiles, the 2 and the -2 together is something that we called a 0 pair. All right, let's do a couple of these down here. -66 plus 42. So I'm going to envision where this is on the number line. I know -66 is over here. And then I'm adding +42. So since I'm not adding negatives, I don't go left, I'm going to go right. But I'm not adding enough to get to 0. I'm going to end up somewhere right here. And to figure out where I end up, I'm going to subtract 42 from 66, and I end up with 24. It doesn't mean I'm over here at +24. I know I end up right here at -24. Look at this one, -57 and 57. Those are opposites or additive inverses. So those are going to equal 0. That's our 0 pair. And then I like this one because it really sort of illustrates what's happening here. 29 plus -28. So let's put 29 over here on the number line. When we're adding negatives, remember we go towards the negative direction. It's like we're dropping. And we're not dropping quite enough to get to 0, right? That would have to drop 29 to get to 0, but we're really close. We drop 28, and so we end up at +1. Okay, I hope that was enough of an introduction to get you guys going on your practice problems. Hopefully you did that with me, and thanks for listening.